The grand assembly hall of the Concordat floated in perfect stillness, a crystalline sphere suspended between three binary stars. Inside, representatives from 100 worlds gathered in careful harmony, their forms diverse beyond imagination, beings of light, of thought, of living stone. They had maintained peace for 12,000 years, not through strength, but through enlightenment. War was a ghost story they told their young, a cautionary tale of primitive ages long abandoned. Sentinel Vec Thorum stood before them in his dress uniform, feeling absurdly solid and physical among these evolved beings. His hands, calloused from years holding weapons, hung at his sides as he addressed the assembly. Beside him, Ambassador Aelios Crane maintained perfect diplomatic composure, though Thorum could see the tension in his jaw. Honored members of the Concordat, Crane began, his voice carrying through the chamber's perfect acoustics, humanity thanks you for this welcome into your ancient brotherhood. We come with open hearts and eager minds, ready to learn from civilizations that have achieved what we still struggle toward, lasting peace. High Arbiter Quenthalis shimmered on her elevated platform, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. When she spoke, her voice resonated like wind through chimes. Humanity's application has been most thoroughly reviewed. Your species shows promise, despite your concerning history. 783 recorded conflicts in the last millennium alone. Troubling, but not unexpected for such a young race. Counselor Mervatia, a being of flowing mercury who represented the Vosari collective, rippled with what might have been amusement. We've all walked that path, young ones. The Kilari fought wars for 3,000 years before transcending such barbarism. The Shinkai nearly destroyed their homeworld twice. You'll grow beyond it, as we all did. Violence is merely a phase of evolutionary adolescence. Thorum's fingers twitched. He'd read the histories. The Concordat's last military action was 8,000 years ago, and it consisted of parking ships near a disputed mining colony until both sides agreed to mediation. They called it the Blockade of Enlightenment. It lasted 6 days before everyone sat down for negotiations. Crane smiled diplomatically. We appreciate your wisdom, Counselor. However, as part of our integration protocols, we'd like to present our proposed defense coordination frameworks. While we hope never to need them, prudent preparation. Defense? Quenthalis interrupted, her chiming voice carrying a note of confusion. Against what enemy, Ambassador? The Concordat has no enemies. We have disagreements, certainly, disputes over resources or territorial boundaries, but these are resolved through dialogue and arbitration. The Galaxy Accord, signed by every sapient civilization in known space, forbids aggressive military action. War is illegal, young friend. Literally illegal. Thorum couldn't stop himself. With respect, High Arbiter, laws only work when everyone agrees to follow them. The chamber fell silent. 100 alien gazes turned toward him, ranging from curiosity to pity to something that looked disturbingly like condescension. Mervatia spoke gently, as one might address a confused child. Sentinel Thorum, the Accord has held for 12 millennia. Every species that reaches the stars comes to the same realization: cooperation surpasses competition, dialogue defeats violence, understanding conquers fear. We don't maintain peace through the threat of force. We maintain it because we've evolved beyond the primitive impulses that once drove our ancestors to murder one another over territory and resources. Humanity will learn this truth in time, added Quenthalis. Your military structures, impressive though they may be by historical standards, are artifacts of a darker age. Here, you'll find them unnecessary. The Concordat maintains a security fleet, of course, but they are essentially traffic controllers and rescue services. When was the last hostile engagement, Counselor? Mervatia seemed to consult some internal database. The incident at Varuna 7, approximately 600 years ago. A mining platform accidentally fired upon what it believed to be pirates. Turned out to be a merchant vessel with faulty identification transponders. 3 casualties, all accidental. The platform operator received counseling and retraining. No malicious intent was found. Thorum exchanged a glance with Crane. The ambassador gave him a subtle shake of the head, not the time, not the place. But Thorum had spent 30 years in uniform, fought in the border wars on Proxima, commanded the defense during the Enceladus siege. He knew what predators looked like, and more importantly, he knew what prey looked like. The Concordat was prey that had forgotten predators existed. We'll submit our defense proposals for review, Crane said smoothly. Consider them an academic exercise in historical military doctrine, if nothing else. Perhaps useful for educational purposes. Quenthalis seemed to accept this. Very well. Now, regarding your colony distribution rights. The meeting continued into mundane matters, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, technology sharing protocols. Thorum stood at attention, but his mind wandered to the briefings he'd read on the journey here. The Concordat controlled 800 settled worlds, with a combined population exceeding 4 trillion beings. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's. Their society was stable, prosperous, enlightened, and completely, utterly defenseless. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Captain Josiah Webb was reviewing supply manifests on Threshold Prime when the first alarm sounded. The human colony, established just 5 years ago on the edge of Concordat space, housed 70,000 civilians and a modest garrison of 500 soldiers. It wasn't strategic, wasn't wealthy, wasn't important except to the people who lived there. Webb looked up from his datapad as his comm officer burst into the prefab headquarters. "Sir, we've got multiple unidentified vessels dropping out of hyperspace. They're not responding to hails and they're not broadcasting Concordat identification codes." "Show me." The holographic display materialized above his desk, showing 18 ships arranged in an attack formation that Webb recognized immediately. Wolf Pack configuration, designed to overwhelm point defenses through concentrated fire. The vessels themselves were sleek, predatory, covered in what looked like black angular armor that absorbed sensor scans. "Get me the Concordat security fleet," Webb ordered, already pulling up defensive protocols. "And wake up Sentinel Thorum. Tell him we've got company." The comm officer's face went pale. "Sir, the security fleet is, they're requesting clarification on whether this constitutes a hostile act. They're asking the approaching vessels to identify themselves and state their intentions." Webb stared at her. "They're in attack formation, moving at combat speed toward a civilian colony. What the hell else do they need?" "The security fleet says that without confirmed hostile intent, they cannot legally open fire. They've cited Concordat Resolution 445A, the presumption of peaceful intent doctrine. They're sending a diplomatic vessel to establish communications." Through the window, Webb could see families walking through the colony's main street, children playing in the central plaza. Farmers heading to the hydroponic domes for the morning shift. 70,000 people who trusted the Concordat's promise of peace to keep them safe. "Sound general quarters," Webb said quietly. "Lock down all civilians in emergency shelters. I want every soldier at their post in 5 minutes. If the security fleet wants to negotiate, fine. But we're going to be ready for war." The comm officer hesitated. "Sir, our garrison is rated for bandit suppression and civil order. We're not equipped for fleet engagement." "Then we'll make do with what we have." Webb met her eyes. "I've read the after-action reports from the Concordat's last dozen incidents. Do you know how many times they've encountered actual hostile intent?" "No, sir." "0. Every single time, it was a misunderstanding, a technical malfunction, a cultural miscommunication. The Concordat has spent 12,000 years assuming everyone in the galaxy is fundamentally peaceful." He pulled up the tactical display again, watching those 18 ships grow closer. "I hope to God they're right. But if they're wrong, we're the ones who'll pay for it." The first ship opened fire 17 minutes later. The Concordat diplomatic vessel, a beautiful thing of flowing curves and artistic design, disappeared in a ball of superheated plasma. No warning. No demands. No communication whatsoever. Just violence, pure and efficient. Webb watched the destruction on his screen, then keyed his comm to all channels. "This is Captain Josiah Webb to all military and civilian personnel on Threshold Prime. We are under attack by hostile forces. This is not a drill. All civilians proceed immediately to designated shelters. All military personnel, implement Defense Protocol Omega. We stand our ground. We hold this line. Humanity does not abandon its own." Across the colony, families ran for shelter. Soldiers grabbed weapons they'd never expected to fire in anger. And in the Grand Assembly Hall, halfway across the galaxy, High Arbiter Quenthalis received word that the impossible had happened. Someone had broken the peace. The Concordat's response was immediate and characteristically ineffective. Emergency sessions were called. Strongly worded condemnations were drafted. Economic sanctions were proposed. Diplomatic channels were frantically opened to the attacking force, which identified themselves only as the Wraith Collective, a civilization that had isolated itself beyond the galactic rim for the last 2,000 years, refusing all contact with the Concordat. Now they were back, and they were done talking. Sentinel Thorum stood in the military command center on Concordat Prime, watching 3 separate battles unfold across holographic displays. Threshold Prime, where Captain Webb's small garrison faced impossible odds. Shinkai Garden World 7, a planet of poets and philosophers with no military whatsoever. And Kilari Orbital Station Epsilon, a research platform studying dark matter and manned by scientists who probably couldn't identify a weapon if shown one. The Kilari station has surrendered, reported his intelligence officer. The Wraith accepted their surrender and they're processing the population. We're not sure what that means. It means slavery or worse, Thorum said flatly. He turned to Ambassador Crane, who stood nearby looking shell-shocked. Where's the Concordat fleet response? Crane gestured helplessly at another display showing the Grand Assembly in heated debate. They're arguing about whether military intervention requires a 2/3 majority vote or just a simple majority. Some councillors are insisting this might still be a misunderstanding. Others want to send mediators to negotiate a ceasefire. Negotiate? Thorum's voice was very quiet. They destroyed a diplomatic vessel without warning. They're attacking 3 population centers simultaneously. And the Concordat wants to negotiate. They don't understand, Crane said. How could they? None of them have fought a real war in thousands of years. They've forgotten what predators look like. Thorum watched the displays. The Shinkai Garden world was already burning. The Wraith had simply bombarded it from orbit, targeting population centers with ruthless efficiency. No ground invasion, no occupation. Just extermination. The death toll was already in the millions. But Threshold Prime? Threshold Prime was fighting back. Webb's garrison had fallen back to prepared positions around the colony proper. They deployed every anti-ship weapon in their limited arsenal, turning the colony into a fortress. The Wraith ships, expecting easy prey, had instead encountered coordinated fire, tactical discipline, and human soldiers who knew exactly how to hurt an enemy. 2 Wraith vessels limped away, trailing atmosphere. A third was simply gone, torn apart by a lucky shot from their single heavy railgun. The remaining ships had backed off, seemingly confused by resistance. Thorum made his decision. Crane, tell the Concordat they can debate all they want. Humanity is going to war. Vec, we don't have authorization. We don't need authorization. We're defending our people. That's not politics, it's survival. He turned to his command staff. I want every human military asset mobilized. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. If it flies and can mount a gun, I want it headed for Threshold Prime. We're going to show the galaxy what war looks like. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, even if we mobilize everything, we're one species against an enemy fleet that just destroyed a Concordat world. We'll be massively outnumbered. Thorum smiled grimly. Son, humanity has been outnumbered in every fight worth fighting. We'll manage. He pulled up the tactical display, already planning fleet movements, supply lines, defensive positions. Old instincts, old knowledge, rising from deep in humanity's violent past. The Concordat had forgotten how to fight. But humanity never would. The command bridge of the Unbroken Dawn hummed with controlled chaos as Sentinel Vec Thorum's flagship dropped out of hyperspace 3 million kilometers from Threshold Prime. Through the forward viewports, he could see the battle, a swirling mess of energy signatures, debris fields, and the distinctive plasma trails of Wraith weapons fire. Status report, Thorum commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. Lieutenant Myra Castellan, his tactical officer, pulled up the holographic display with practiced efficiency. Her fingers danced across the controls, highlighting friendly and hostile positions. Captain Webb's garrison is still holding the primary defensive perimeter. They've lost the orbital platforms but maintained ground-to-space capability. Wraith fleet has pulled back to medium range after losing 4 vessels. Current enemy count, 14 combat-effective ships, ranging from frigate to dreadnought class. Thorum studied the display. Webb had done the impossible, held off a superior force for 6 days with nothing but determination and dirty tactics. The colony's surface was pockmarked with craters, entire districts reduced to rubble, but the central shelters remained intact. 70,000 civilians still lived, protected by 500 soldiers who refused to break. Our fleet composition? Thorum asked. 12 destroyers, 5 cruisers, 2 carriers, and the Dawn, Castellan reported. Plus 18 support vessels. Admiral Chen's second wave is 3 days behind us with reinforcements, but... She trailed off, unnecessary to finish the sentence. 3 days might as well be 3 years. Captain Webb is requesting immediate communication, the comm officer announced. Put him through. Webb's face appeared on the main screen, haggard and smoke-stained. Behind him, Durham could see the command bunker's walls shaking from impacts. Sentinel. Damn good to see you, sir. Status, Captain? We've got maybe 48 hours of ammunition left at current expenditure rates. 73 KIA, 216 wounded. Civilian casualties are miraculously low, less than 100. The shelters are holding. Webb's jaw tightened. But we're on borrowed time, sir. The Wraith are probing our defenses, learning our patterns. They'll crack us eventually. Not on my watch, Captain. You've held the line long enough. Time for reinforcements to do their job. Durham turned to Castellan. Battle stations. Prepare for immediate engagement. I want a firing solution on that dreadnought first. Cut off the head, the body follows. Castellan's expression flickered with something between admiration and concern. Sir, standard Concordat engagement protocols require we attempt communication before. We're not the Concordat, Lieutenant. We're humanity. And humanity knows that sometimes the only communication predators understand is violence. He keyed the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Sentinel Durham. We have civilians on that planet who've endured 6 days of hell while the galaxy debated philosophy. We have soldiers who've held an impossible line with impossible courage. Today, we show the Wraith, and the entire Concordat, that humanity remembers how to fight. Attack pattern Delta 7. Close to knife-fighting range. Make them bleed. The human fleet surged forward. Warprime Zethkor watched the approaching human ships from the bridge of his dreadnought Extinction's Promise with something approaching amusement. The small garrison on the planet below had been entertaining. Stubborn, certainly. More creative than most prey species in their defensive tactics. But ultimately irrelevant. Now more humans were coming. Zethkor had studied their species during the Wraith's long isolation. Violent, certainly. Warlike, undoubtedly. But they were children playing with weapons compared to the Wraith, who had spent 2 millennia perfecting the art of conquest while the soft Concordat civilizations forgot how to fight. Warprime, his weapons master reported, the human fleet is not slowing. They are accelerating to attack speed. Of course they are. Pride requires they attempt to save their colony. Zethkor's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Let them come. We'll destroy their fleet in sight of their civilians. Break their spirits before we break their bodies. The human ships closed to weapons range. Zethkor waited for them to slow, to adopt the standard Concordat engagement posture, long-range bombardment, careful maneuvering, the sterile chess game that passed for naval combat among the civilized species. Instead, the humans did something insane. They charged. Not a tactical advance. Not a measured approach. A full speed, damn the torpedoes, suicidal charge directly into the Wraith formation. Evasive maneuvers. Zethkor roared, but it was already too late. The human destroyer Relentless screamed past his dreadnought's port side at point-blank range, close enough that Zethkor could see the hull markings. Every weapon the destroyer had opened fire simultaneously, railguns, missiles, plasma cannons, even what looked like compressed explosive charges physically launched at the dreadnought's hull. The Extinction's Promise shuddered. Shields flared and failed. Armor buckled. And before Zethkor could process what happened, the Relentless was gone, already engaging the next ship in line, leaving his dreadnought wounded and reeling. Damage report, he screamed. Multiple breaches, decks 7 through 12. Shield generators 1 and 3 are offline. We've lost. Another human cruiser, the Iron Testament, swept through the formation like a blade through silk. This time, Zethkor understood the tactic. The humans weren't trying to win a naval battle through superior firepower or technology. They were turning their ships into weapons, using speed and aggression to negate the Wraith's numerical advantage. It was primitive. Barbaric. Reckless. It was working. On the ground, Captain Webb watched the orbital battle through his command center's displays and felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 6 days, hope. They're not following any recognized engagement doctrine, his tactical officer said, wonder in her voice. They're brawling. Like a bar fight in space. Webb smiled grimly. That's humanity for you. We don't read the manual because we know the enemy won't either. He pulled up the ground defense displays. Wraith ground forces are repositioning. Looks like they're preparing another assault on the eastern perimeter. They'll hit us while their fleet is distracted, try to break through while we're watching the sky. Sir, we've only got one platoon covering that sector. They're exhausted. Then we'd better give them a reason to stay awake. Webb keyed his command channel. All units, this is Captain Webb. Our people came for us. They're bleeding in orbit to keep us alive. When the Wraith ground forces attack, I want every soldier on this planet to remember something. We don't retreat. We don't surrender. We hold the line until relief arrives or until we're dead. There is no third option. The response came through 100 channels simultaneously. Understood, sir. The Wraith ground assault came 20 minutes later, 600 soldiers in powered armor, supported by hover tanks and artillery. They hit the eastern perimeter like a hammer, expecting the exhausted human defenders to crack. Instead, they found landmines. Hidden gun emplacements. Soldiers who'd had 6 days to prepare every meter of ground and knew exactly where to hurt an advancing enemy. The Wraith pushed forward. The humans gave ground grudgingly, falling back to secondary positions, then tertiary positions, each retreat planned and measured. And at every position, the Wraith paid in blood. Lieutenant Myra Castellan watched the battle develop from her tactical station aboard the Unbroken Dawn and felt a strange mixture of pride and horror. This was her first real combat engagement. She'd trained for years, studied historical battles, run 1,000 simulations. Nothing had prepared her for the reality. Destroyer Valiant has taken critical damage, she reported. They're venting atmosphere, main reactor is compromised. Thorum's response was immediate. Tell them to ram the nearest Wraith cruiser. Castellan's hands froze over her controls. Sir. You heard me, Lieutenant. If they're going down anyway, take an enemy with them. She relayed the order, watching as the Valiant, already dying, changed course toward the Wraith cruiser that had wounded it. The cruiser tried to maneuver away, but the Valiant's captain pushed his dying reactor to full power one last time. The collision was catastrophic. Both ships disappeared in a sphere of expanding plasma and debris. 218 souls on the Valiant, Castellan said quietly. 218 heroes who saved thousands of civilians below, Thurum corrected. Log their names for commendation. And target that Wraith frigate, make their sacrifice count. The battle raged for 3 hours. In orbital terms, it was an eternity. Ship after ship engaged at ranges that would have horrified Concordat naval doctrine. The humans lost 4 vessels destroyed, 6 more crippled. But the Wraith fleet was shattered, half their ships destroyed or disabled, the remainder retreating in disorder. Zethkor watched his fleet crumble with disbelief. This wasn't how combat worked in the modern galaxy. Battles were calculated affairs, won through superior positioning and firepower applied from safe distances. The humans fought like savages, using their ships as weapons, their soldiers as living shields, their entire civilization as a single fist smashing into the Wraith's carefully planned invasion. War Prime, we must withdraw, his second advised. We've lost too many ships. Zethkor's pride demanded he refuse. But his survival instinct was stronger. Sound the retreat. All ships, fall back to Rally Point Theta. As his dreadnought limped away from Threshold Prime, Zethkor made a promise to himself. The humans had won this battle through primitive aggression and suicidal tactics. Next time, the Wraith would be ready. Next time, humanity would learn what happened to species that defied the Wraith Collective. On Threshold Prime, Captain Webb watched the Wraith fleet withdraw and allowed himself one moment of relief. Then he keyed his comm to all channels. All units, maintain combat readiness. Begin damage assessment and casualty recovery. And someone get me a line to Sentinel Thurum. I need to thank that magnificent bastard personally. Aboard the Unbroken Dawn, Thurum stared at the tactical display showing the retreating Wraith fleet. The victory felt hollow. 4 ships lost. Over 800 dead. Thousands wounded. Threshold Prime's surface looked like a war zone because it was a war zone. And this was just the beginning. Lieutenant Castellan, compile a full after-action report. I want it transmitted to every human colony, every military installation, every ship in our fleet. He turned to face his exhausted bridge crew. What happened here today gets repeated across the galaxy. The Wraith hit 2 other Concordat worlds, both surrendered without firing a shot. Millions enslaved or dead. But humanity stood. We held the line. Castellan looked up from her displays. Sir, I'm receiving reports from Concordat Prime. The Grand Assembly has been watching the battle. And? They're horrified, sir. Multiple species representatives have lodged formal complaints about our tactics. They're calling them barbaric, excessive, violations of civilized warfare conventions. Thurum laughed, a bitter sound. Civilized warfare. There's an oxymoron for you. He keyed open a channel to Concordat Prime, knowing his words would be recorded, analyzed, debated by 1,000 scholars and politicians. This is Sentinel Vec Thurum to the Grand Assembly. You're welcome. Humanity just saved 70,000 lives using the barbaric, excessive, uncivilized tactics that you evolved beyond. While you debated resolutions and drafted condemnations, we fought. While you sought to understand the Wraith's motivations, we killed them. This is what war looks like when you actually fight to win. Get used to it, because the galaxy just woke up to a harsh reality. Peace only lasts as long as no one calls your bluff. He cut the channel before anyone could respond. Sir, Castellan said hesitantly, that's going to cause problems with the Concordat leadership. Good. Maybe it'll cause them to actually do something. Thurum pulled up the strategic display showing the entire Concordat sphere. The Wraith hit 3 targets simultaneously, Threshold Prime, a Shinkai world, and a Kilari station. That's not random. They're testing the Concordat's defenses, probing for weaknesses. And they found plenty. What do? We prepare for the next wave. Because it's coming, Lieutenant. The Wraith aren't done. They're just getting started. He turned to his comm officer. Get me Ambassador Crane. It's time for humanity to have a very uncomfortable conversation with the Concordat about the price of survival. Halfway across the galaxy, High Arbiter Quinthalis watched the recordings from Threshold Prime with something she'd never experienced before, fear. The humans had fought with a ferocity that seemed incomprehensible to her crystalline mind. They'd sacrificed ships deliberately, used their bodies as shields, fought with a desperation that spoke of species-level trauma. Counselor Mervatia flowed beside her, equally disturbed. The human tactics, they're effective, but so brutal. Did you see how that destroyer commander chose to ram the enemy vessel? 200 beings died on that ship. 2,000 beings would have died on Threshold Prime if he hadn't, Quinthalis observed quietly. The mathematics are uncomfortable. We can't endure such violence. The Concordat was founded on principles of. The Concordat is dying, interrupted a new voice. They turned to see Elder Si Viralan, an ancient Kilari who hadn't attended an assembly session in 300 years. His ancient form, weathered stone shot through with veins of crystal, seemed to absorb the light around him. I remember the last war, Arbiter. 12,000 years ago, before the Concordat, when species fought for survival rather than principles. I remember what it took to win. What it cost. We built this peace on the graves of those who remembered. Surely we haven't forgotten entirely, Mervatia protested. Haven't we? Tell me, Counselor, how many military commanders serve in the Concordat security fleet? Mervatia consulted his internal database. None. The security fleet is staffed by logistics coordinators, traffic management specialists, and rescue service operators. Exactly. We have police, not soldiers. Rescue workers, not warriors. We've spent 12,000 years evolving beyond violence, and now we discover that evolution made us defenseless. Si Viralan gestured toward the recordings from Threshold Prime. The humans haven't evolved. They still carry the scars of their violent history. And right now, those scars are the only thing keeping this Concordat alive. Quinthalis felt her crystalline structure resonate with uncertainty. What are you suggesting, Elder? I'm suggesting that perhaps humanity's greatest gift to the Concordat isn't their art or culture or technology. It's their memory. They remember how to fight. How to kill. How to do terrible things for necessary reasons. Si Viralan's ancient eyes fixed on the Arbiter. The question is, are we willing to learn from them? Or will we maintain our principles even as the Wraith enslave our worlds? The question hung in the air, unanswered. On Threshold Prime, as medics tended to the wounded and engineers began repairs, Captain Josiah Webb stood at the edge of a crater and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, Sentinel Thorum's fleet was preparing for the next battle. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Wraith Collective was planning its revenge. And somewhere in the halls of power on Concordat Prime, ancient civilizations were wrestling with a truth humanity had learned long ago. Sometimes survival requires becoming the monster you fear. Webb thought about the soldiers he'd lost. The civilians who'd spent 6 days in terror. The children who'd never forget the sound of orbital bombardment. Then he thought about the alternative, enslavement, extinction, the slow death of everything humanity had built among the stars. No, he said quietly to the empty air. Whatever it costs. Whatever we have to become. We survive. It was the most human sentiment in the galaxy. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the Concordat was beginning to understand why that mattered. The war room on Concordat Prime had never been designed for war. Its elegant curves and artistic lighting were meant to showcase the beauty of cooperative governance, not the ugly mathematics of survival. Now, holographic displays showing fleet movements and casualty reports cluttered every surface, and the assembled representatives looked distinctly uncomfortable. Sentinel Vec Thorum stood at the center, surrounded by beings who'd spent millennia avoiding everything he represented. Ambassador Alios Crane stood beside him, diplomatic mask firmly in place, though Thorum could see the exhaustion in his eyes. 3 weeks, Thorum said, his voice cutting through the murmured discussions. The Wraith have been at war with the Concordat for 3 weeks. In that time, they've attacked 17 worlds. 14 surrendered without resistance. Threshold Prime held. The human colonies at Pershing's Rock and New Kyoto held. Current enemy fleet strength is estimated at 200 vessels, with more arriving daily from beyond the galactic rim. High Arbiter Quenthalis shimmered with distress. The casualties on the worlds that surrendered have been less than those on the worlds that resisted. The Wraith process the populations but don't exterminate them. Perhaps surrender is the path that preserves more life. Thorum's jaw tightened. Process. That's the word you're using? Arbiter, I've seen the reports from our intelligence assets. Processing means sorting populations by usefulness. The strong become slaves. The intelligent become technicians working under threat of death. The weak, the elderly, the very young, they disappear. We don't know where. We don't know why. But entire demographics vanish from worlds the Wraith occupy. Counselor Mervatia flowed forward. Even so, billions still live. On Threshold Prime alone, over 3,000 died defending the colony. Had they surrendered, those lives would have been spared. To what end? Thorum challenged. So they could live in chains? So their children could grow up knowing only servitude? There are fates worse than death, Counselor. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way, in our own history. We decided a long time ago that freedom is worth dying for. A very human perspective, observed Elder S.I. Viralan from his position at the edge of the assembly. But not one universally shared. The Kilari believe life itself is sacred. The preservation of existence outweighs all other considerations. Then the Kilari are already conquered, Thorum said bluntly. You just haven't admitted it yet. The room erupted in protest. Thorum let it wash over him, unmoved. He'd spent 3 weeks fighting a war while the Concordat debated philosophy. He was done being diplomatic. Sentinel Thorum, Quenthalis said, her voice carrying authority that silenced the others, humanity has demonstrated remarkable martial prowess. But you are one species among hundreds in the Concordat. You cannot fight this war alone. Then help us, Thorum said simply. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. Your industrial capacity could produce war material on a scale we can't match. Your populations number in the trillions. If the Concordat actually mobilized for war, the Wraith wouldn't stand a chance. But we don't know how to mobilize for war, Mervatia said quietly. Our logistic systems are designed for trade, not military supply chains. Our ship production focuses on efficiency and elegance, not combat capability. Our populations have no experience with violence. We would be children playing with weapons we don't understand. Then learn, Thorum urged. You've got humans willing to teach you. We've got 12,000 years of military doctrine, hard-won lessons written in blood, tactics that could turn your superior technology into actual fighting capability. And become like you, another counselor challenged. Violent? Aggressive? Forever scarred by the memory of war. Thorum met the being's gaze steadily. Yes. Exactly like us. Because being like us means surviving. The debate raged for hours. Some species wanted to sue for peace, to negotiate with the Wraith, to find a diplomatic solution. Others wanted to hire mercenaries, to outsource their defense to species that still remembered violence. A few, very few, agreed with Thorum that the only path forward was through fire and blood. Meanwhile, on the contested world of Meridian's Edge, Lieutenant Myra Castellan was learning firsthand what modern warfare looked like when civilizations clashed. The Unbroken Dawn had been in continuous combat for 72 hours, part of a larger human fleet trying to relieve a Shinkai world under siege. The battle had devolved into a grinding meat grinder of ship-to-ship combat, with neither side willing to give ground. Enemy dreadnought targeting our port side, her sensor officer called out. Impact in 15 seconds. Evasive maneuvers, pattern Gamma 3, Castellan ordered. The Dawn's captain had been killed 6 hours ago when a plasma blast vaporized the forward section. Command had fallen to her, a tactical officer who'd never expected to captain a battleship in the middle of a war zone. The ship shuddered as it maneuvered, old damage making the artificial gravity fluctuate. Around her, crew members worked with exhausted efficiency, running on stimulants and desperation. Target their engines, Castellan commanded. If we can't kill it, cripple it. The Dawn's main railgun spoke, a lance of accelerated metal crossing the void at a fraction of light speed. The shot struck true, tearing through the dreadnought's engine housing. The massive ship began to list, losing formation. Good shooting, Castellan said, then caught herself. Good shooting. 300 beings just died on that ship because she gave an order. How many families would never see their loved ones again because of her tactical decision? She pushed the thought away. There would be time for guilt later. Right now, there were people depending on her to keep them alive. Her comm officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the Shinkai Defense Coordinator. They're requesting immediate orbital support for ground forces in Sector 7. Castellan pulled up the tactical display. Sector 7 was the location of Meridian's Edge's primary population center. 2 million civilians huddled in shelters while Wraith ground forces pushed toward them. How many ships can we spare? None? Every vessel is engaged. Castellan looked at the display, at the impossible choices staring back at her. Save the civilians below or maintain the orbital defensive line. Protect 2 million or risk the entire fleet. She thought about Captain Webb, holding an impossible position on Threshold Prime. About Sentinel Thorum, making brutal decisions that saved lives even as they cost others. About humanity's entire history of doing terrible things for necessary reasons. Helm, take us down into the atmosphere. Combat altitude, maximum velocity. Her bridge crew stared at her in shock. Taking a battleship into atmospheric combat was insane. They'd be vulnerable to ground fire, lose maneuverability, risk catastrophic failure if their damaged systems gave out. The Dawn isn't rated for. I don't care what she's rated for, Castellan interrupted. There are 2 million civilians down there about to die. We're the only ship that can reach them in time. So we're going down. The unbroken Dawn dropped toward the planet like a falling star. Warprime Zethkor had learned to hate humans with a passion that surprised even him. 3 weeks of combat had taught him that humanity was everything the Wraith had been told they weren't: disciplined, strategic, ruthlessly efficient. They didn't fight like primitives playing with weapons. They fought like professionals who'd been practicing violence for millennia. Now, as his ground forces pushed toward Meridian's Edge's capital, Zethkor permitted himself a moment of satisfaction. The city would fall within hours. 2 million new subjects to process, including a significant population of Shinkai intellectuals who would prove useful. Then sensors screamed a warning. Something massive was descending through the atmosphere, moving faster than any ship should dare. What is that? Zethkor demanded. His tactical officer's mandibles clicked in fear. It's the human battleship. The one we've been fighting in orbit. It's Warprime, it's coming down. Zethkor watched in disbelief as the unbroken Dawn roared through the clouds, shedding superheated plasma from atmospheric friction. The ship leveled off at 2,000 meters, well within range of ground-based weapons, and opened fire. Every gun the Dawn possessed spoke simultaneously. Railgun rounds tore through Wraith armored columns like paper. Missiles immolated entire battalions. Energy weapons carved trenches through advancing formations. The battleship swept across the combat zone like the wrath of an angry god, utterly annihilating everything in its path. All units, concentrate fire on that ship. Zethkor roared. Bring it down. Ground-based plasma cannons targeted the Dawn, hammering its shields. The battleship's damaged systems struggled under the assault. But it kept firing, kept moving, kept killing. On the bridge, Castellan felt every impact like a physical blow. Shield integrity at 40%. Hull breaches on decks 9 through 15. We're venting atmosphere. How long can we maintain this? Her executive officer asked. Long enough, Castellan said grimly. She keyed open a channel to the Shinkai Defense Forces. This is Lieutenant Castellan of the Unbroken Dawn. We're clearing a path for civilian evacuation. Get those people moving now. Below, 2 million civilians emerged from shelters and ran for the evacuation zones, protected by a single damaged battleship that refused to retreat. The Dawn lasted another 40 minutes before critical systems finally failed. Castellan ordered the evacuation, and the crew abandoned ship in the emergency pods. The battleship, its engines dead, its weapons silent, crashed into the outskirts of the capital in a fireball visible from orbit. But by then, 1.8 million civilians had escaped. 200,000 died in the fighting, a terrible toll. But millions lived because one human officer decided that some things were worth sacrificing a battleship for. Zethkor watched the dawn fall and felt no satisfaction. He'd won the battle, technically. But the civilians had escaped. The city was damaged beyond usefulness. And his ground forces had been reduced to 30% effectiveness by a single ship's suicidal defense. This was the human way of war, every victory purchased at a price that made winning feel like losing. On Concordat Prime, the debate finally reached its conclusion 3 days later. Elder Si Viralen rose slowly, his ancient form commanding immediate attention. "I have lived for 16,000 years, he began, his voice like stones grinding together. "I remember the last great war, before the Concordat, when species fought not for territory or resources but for the simple right to exist. I remember what it cost to win. What it cost to lose. What it cost to survive." He paused, his gaze sweeping the assembly. "I had hoped never to see such times again. I dedicated my long life to building a galaxy where war was impossible, where violence was obsolete, where reason and dialogue solved all conflicts." "Then what do you propose, Elder?" Quenthalis asked gently. "I propose we face reality. The Wraith don't care about our principles. They don't respect our enlightenment. They see our pacifism as weakness and our mercy as foolishness." Si Viralen turned to Thorum. "Humanity remembers how to fight because they never had the luxury of forgetting. They're scarred, violent, aggressive, and right now, those scars are the only thing keeping this Concordat alive." He let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "I propose we do what we should have done 3 weeks ago. We ask humanity to teach us how to wage war. We put aside 12,000 years of carefully cultivated peace and remember what our ancestors knew, that sometimes survival requires becoming what you fear." The assembly erupted in debate, but Si Viralen raised a stone hand for silence. "But we do this with open eyes. If we learn from humanity, we don't just learn their tactics. We inherit their trauma. We take on their scars. The galaxy that emerges from this war will be fundamentally changed. Peace will no longer be guaranteed. Violence will no longer be unthinkable. We will have lost our innocence forever." "Is survival worth that price?" someone asked. "Ask the billions enslaved on conquered worlds," Si Viralen replied. "Ask the dead who surrendered without fighting. Ask yourselves if your principles mean anything if you're not alive to uphold them." The vote was close. Nearly 40% of the Concordat species voted against military mobilization, preferring to continue diplomatic efforts. But 60% voted yes. It was enough. "Is survival worth that price?" someone asked. "Ask the billions enslaved on conquered worlds," Si Viralen replied. "Ask the dead who surrendered without fighting. Ask yourselves if your principles mean anything if you're not alive to uphold them." The vote was close. Nearly 40% of the Concordat species voted against military mobilization, preferring to continue diplomatic efforts. But 60% voted yes. It was enough. High Arbiter Quenthalis turned to Thorum, her crystalline body dimmed with something that might have been sorrow. "Sentinel Thorum, the Concordat formally requests humanity's assistance in establishing proper military doctrine, training, and command structure. We place ourselves under human guidance in matters of war." Thorum felt no triumph, only a deep weariness. "We'll help. But understand something, Arbiter, this isn't a quick fix. Learning to fight takes time. Learning to fight well takes generations. The Concordat is about to get a crash course in something humanity spent 50,000 years perfecting. It's going to be ugly." "How ugly?" Mervatia asked. "You'll lose people who could have been saved because commanders make rookie mistakes. You'll suffer defeats that experience would have prevented. You'll discover that your populations aren't psychologically prepared for the realities of combat. Some will break, some will refuse to fight, some will do things in the heat of battle they'll spend the rest of their lives regretting." Thorum met the counselor's gaze. "War doesn't just kill bodies. It kills innocence. The Concordat you knew is already dead. We're just trying to make sure something survives to take its place." The mobilization began immediately. Human military advisors spread throughout the Concordat, teaching species who'd forgotten violence how to wage war. Factories retooled to produce weapons instead of art. Ships were retrofitted with armor and guns rather than elegant observation decks. Populations that had lived in peace for millennia learned how to shoot, how to kill, how to die. It was clumsy. Painful. Thousands died in training accidents alone. Entire species struggled with the psychological weight of preparing for violence. Some couldn't adapt. The Kilari, with their deep cultural commitment to non-violence, largely removed themselves from combat roles, though they contributed their industrial capacity to the war effort. But slowly, painfully, the Concordat learned. 6 weeks after Threshold Prime, a joint human Vosari fleet caught a Wraith strike force at the Helix Nebula and destroyed it completely. The Vosari, who could manipulate their liquid metal bodies into complex shapes, proved exceptional at damage control and shipboard combat once they got over their aversion to hurting others. 8 weeks in, a Shinkai ground force successfully defended their colony world using tactics taught by human advisors: fortified positions, lead defenses, strategic retreats that load the enemy into kill zones. 3 months after the war began, the Concordat launched its first coordinated offensive, retaking 2 occupied worlds. The casualties were horrific by Concordat standards: 15,000 dead, 40,000 wounded. But they won. Zethkor watched the Concordat's evolution with growing concern. The humans had done the impossible. They taught pacifists to fight. Not well, not yet, but well enough to stop the Wraith advance. His fleet, which had seemed unstoppable at the war's beginning, now found itself in a grinding stalemate. War Prime, his strategic advisor reported, "Our projections show we cannot sustain current casualties. The Concordat's industrial capacity is 50 times larger than ours. As they improve tactically, our numerical advantage shrinks." "Then we accelerate the timetable," Zethkor decided. "Commit the reserve fleet. Hit the Concordat with everything we have before they learn how to truly fight." The assault came at Terminus Station, a massive orbital facility that served as the Concordat's primary military logistics hub. 300 Wraith ships, the largest fleet humanity had ever faced, dropped out of hyperspace with one objective: destroy the station and cripple the Concordat's war effort. Sentinel Vec Thorum, now officially commanding the Concordat Defense Forces, watched the Wraith fleet appear on his displays and felt his stomach drop. "They're betting everything on this attack. If they win, we lose our ability to coordinate fleet movements. The war's over." Ambassador Crane stood beside him, looking decades older than he had 3 months ago. "How many ships do we have?" 240. About half human, half Concordat species. We're outnumbered, and they're more experienced. Can we win? Thorum studied the display, running tactical calculations in his head. The Wraith had the advantage in numbers and experience. But the Concordat fleet had learned from humanity's example. They knew how to fight dirty now. How to sacrifice. How to do terrible things for necessary reasons. "Maybe," he said finally. "If we're willing to pay the price." The Battle of Terminus Station lasted 18 hours. It was the bloodiest engagement in Concordat history, a swirling melee of hundreds of ships fighting at ranges where you could see the enemy vessels with naked eyes. Both sides threw everything they had into the fight: no reserves, no holding back, no second chances. Lieutenant Myra Castellan, commanding a destroyer after the loss of the Unbroken Dawn, found herself in the thick of the fighting. Her ship was one of dozens screening the station, buying time for the heavier vessels to maneuver. "Enemy cruiser breaking through our line," her tactical officer called. Castellan didn't hesitate. "Ramming course. Full power." "Oh. Do it." "That cruiser reaches the station, 10,000 people die. We're 300. The math's simple." Her crew obeyed. The destroyer accelerated toward the Wraith cruiser, which tried desperately to evade. At the last second, Castellan ordered everyone into emergency pods. They launched into space just as the destroyer collided with the cruiser at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion was visible from the planet below. Castellan floated in her pod, watching the battle through the emergency display. Around her, dozens of other pods held her crew. 283 evacuated, 17 went down with the ship. They'd done their job. The cruiser was destroyed, the station still stood. But she'd sacrificed another ship. More names for the casualty lists. More families receiving the worst news of their lives. She thought about the officer she'd been 3 months ago, horrified by the brutality of warfare. That person felt like a stranger now. Somewhere in the past 90 days, amid the battles and losses and impossible choices, Castellan had become what the war required her to be. She'd become like Thorum. Like Webb. Like every human commander who'd learned that sometimes love for the living requires killing the enemy. The battle finally turned when Elder Si Viralen did something no one expected. The ancient Kilari, who'd lived 16,000 years without raising a hand in violence, took direct command of a Kilari industrial ship, a massive vessel designed to move asteroids and build orbital installations. He piloted it directly into the heart of the Wraith fleet and detonated its antimatter reactor. The explosion vaporized everything within 1,000 kilometers. 30 Wraith ships disintegrated instantly. 50 more were crippled. The Wraith formation collapsed, their command structure shattered, their momentum broken. HFY Galactic's last transmission, sent moments before detonation, was simple: sometimes the old must burn so the young can survive. Remember me not as an elder, but as a soldier who understood the price of peace. The Wraith fleet retreated in disorder, having lost nearly 2/3 of their force. The Concordat held Terminus Station, though at a terrible cost: 90 ships destroyed, 60,000 dead, including Elder HFY Galactic. But they'd won. Against overwhelming odds, the civilized species of the galaxy had learned to fight and emerged victorious. Warprime Zethkor fled the battlefield in his damaged dreadnought, the reality of defeat settling over him like a shroud. The humans had done it. They'd taught the prey to become predators. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 days after the battle, Thorum stood in a memorial hall on Concordat Prime, surrounded by representatives from 100 species. The walls were covered with names: 60,000 dead, each one a story, a life, a family left behind. High Arbiter Quenthalis approached him, her crystalline form seeming somehow diminished. "We won," she said quietly. "We survived," Thorum corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" She turned to look at the names on the walls. Elder HFY Galactic lived 16,000 years without violence. Then he became a weapon to save us all. What does that say about the galaxy we've created? "It says that peace is precious because it's fragile," Thorum replied. For 12,000 years, the Concordat lived in a beautiful dream. You believed that evolution meant transcending violence, that enlightenment made war obsolete. And maybe, in a perfect universe, you'd be right. He gestured at the memorial walls. But this isn't a perfect universe. And the price of your dream was forgetting how to protect it. So humanity becomes the Concordat's guardians? The violent children who remember how to fight while the adults maintain their principles. "No," Thorum said firmly. "That's not sustainable. If we learned anything from this war, it's that the Concordat needs to remember how to defend itself. Not outsource it to humans, not pretend violence doesn't exist, actually learn, actually prepare, actually accept that sometimes love means fighting for what you cherish." Quenthalis was silent for a long moment. "We've changed. The Concordat before this war believed in universal peace, in the fundamental goodness of sapient beings, in the power of dialogue to solve all conflicts. Now we've learned to kill. We've learned to sacrifice. We've learned that sometimes survival requires becoming what we fear. Can we ever go back?" "No," Thorum said gently. "You can never go back. But you can go forward. You can build a Concordat that's wiser, stronger, harder to break. You can honor the sacrifice of everyone who died by making sure their deaths meant something. How do we do that? You remember. You teach your children that peace isn't guaranteed, it's earned, every day, by people willing to stand between civilization and chaos. You maintain military forces not because you want to use them, but precisely because you don't. You accept that enlightenment doesn't mean abandoning the capacity for violence, it means understanding when violence is necessary and having the wisdom to use it only then." Crane joined them, looking exhausted. "The Wraith have requested negotiations. They're ready to discuss terms." "What terms?" Quenthalis asked. "Immediate ceasefire, return of occupied territories, reparations for damages, formal recognition of Concordat sovereignty." Crane smiled wearily. "Turns out predators respect strength. Who knew?" Thorum didn't smile. "The war's over, but the hard part's just beginning. Now the Concordat has to figure out who it wants to be, a civilization that learned from this experience, or one that tries to forget as quickly as possible." "What do you think we'll choose?" Quenthalis asked. Thorum looked at the memorial walls, at the names of 60,000 beings who died learning how to fight. Then he looked at the Arbiter, seeing the change in her, the hardness that hadn't been there 3 months ago, the understanding that sometimes principles have to bend to reality. "I think you'll remember," he said finally. "Because forgetting would dishonor everyone who died teaching you." The Concordat emerged from the war transformed. Military academies were established, incorporating human doctrine alongside traditional Concordat values. Ships were designed with both defensive capability and the elegant aesthetics the elder races preferred. Every species maintained defense forces, not because they wanted to fight, but because they understood the alternative. Captain Josiah Webb, promoted to general after his defense of Threshold Prime, helped establish the Concordat's first proper military command structure. Lieutenant Myra Castellan, who'd sacrificed 2 ships and learned what command really meant, became one of the youngest captains in the fleet. And humanity, once the violent children of the galaxy, became the teachers who showed an ancient civilization that sometimes love means fighting, sometimes peace requires strength, and sometimes the price of survival is remembering what you'd rather forget. The galaxy had learned to bleed. But in learning that lesson, it had also learned to survive. 6 months after the war, Thorum stood on Threshold Prime, watching families return to their rebuilt homes. Children played in the reconstructed plaza, their laughter a promise that life continued. In the distance, a monument rose, a wall of names, every soldier and civilian who died in the initial siege. Webb joined him, looking up at the memorial. "Think we did the right thing, sir? Teaching them how to fight?" Thorum considered the question. "I think we did the necessary thing. Whether it's right, history will decide that. The Concordat's different now. Harder. More paranoid. Some species are building weapons they hope never to need. Good. Paranoia keeps you alive. Weapons you hope never to use are better than needing weapons you don't have." Thorum watched the children playing, innocent of the horrors that had raged here. "We didn't steal their innocence, Webb. We kept them alive long enough to choose what kind of civilization they want to be. That's all we could do." "And what about us? What does humanity become after this?" Thorum smiled, a rare expression. "The same thing we've always been, survivors who remember our scars, teachers who pass on hard-won lessons, and hopefully, guardians who make sure the galaxy never forgets what peace actually costs." In the Grand Assembly Hall, a new resolution was being debated, the Sci-fi Doctrine, named for the elder who'd sacrificed everything to save the Concordat. It established permanent military forces, mandatory defense training for all member species, and most controversially, a clause stating that peace maintained through willful ignorance of threat wasn't peace at all, it was just delayed conquest. The debate was fierce. Some species still clung to the old ways, believing that adapting to violence meant abandoning enlightenment. Others argued that true enlightenment meant having the strength to protect what you'd built. High Arbiter Quenthalis, presiding over the debate, finally called for silence. 12,000 years ago, our ancestors looked at a galaxy torn by war and said never again. They built the Concordat as a testament to peace, to cooperation, to the belief that sapient beings could transcend violence through reason and dialogue. She paused, her crystalline body reflecting the light of 1,000 worlds. They were right. And they were wrong. Right because peace is possible, we lived it for 12 millennia. Wrong because they believed peace was inevitable, that evolution guaranteed it, that our enlightenment made us immune to those who choose violence. She looked at the assembled representatives. The Wraith taught us that predators still exist. Humanity taught us that remembering how to fight doesn't make you a monster, it makes you a survivor. Elder Sci-fi taught us that sometimes the greatest act of love is becoming what you fear to protect what you cherish. The Concordat that emerges from this war must be different. Wiser. Stronger. Ready to defend itself while still cherishing peace. We must become a civilization that hopes for the best but prepares for the worst. That extends friendship while maintaining strength. That seeks dialogue but remembers how to fight when dialogue fails. She raised her voice, letting it ring through the chamber. We vote now on the Sci-fi Doctrine. Not as a betrayal of our principles, but as their fulfillment. Peace isn't the absence of the capacity for violence, it's choosing not to use that capacity unless absolutely necessary. Let us be worthy of the sacrifices made to teach us this lesson. The vote passed overwhelmingly. The galaxy had learned to bleed. But more importantly, it had learned why bleeding mattered, because the alternative was extinction, slavery, the slow death of everything civilized beings had built. Humanity, scarred and violent and forever marked by 10,000 years of warfare, had given the Concordat an uncomfortable gift, the knowledge that survival sometimes requires darkness, that love sometimes means fighting, that peace is only possible for those strong enough to defend it. It was a lesson the galaxy would never forget. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was humanity's greatest contribution, not art, not science, not culture, but the simple, terrible understanding that some things are worth fighting for. Even if fighting for them changes you forever.